Before we begin, just a disclaimer. If you're not caught up on Game of Thrones, there may be a couple of spoilers in here, so just watch at your own discretion. Also, if you're checking out my website and you see the original Game of Thrones cake pops that I did, you'll notice that there are a couple of characters that are no longer around. That's sort of a theme of Game of Thrones. People die pretty easily. So enjoy the show and just watch at your own risk. Hello everyone, I'm Nick and welcome to Fantasy Food Show. Today is a special episode for me because we're not only celebrating the season premiere of Game of Thrones, but I'm going to recreate one of my very first fantasy food recipes. A couple of years ago, I created some Game of Thrones cake pops to celebrate the season 3 premiere of Game of Thrones. And I posted some of the pictures of it on my Facebook account, and I had an overwhelming number of positive responses. And it actually fueled me to create this show. So come along with me today as I recreate these Game of Thrones cake pops. Let me show you how it's done. To make the cake pops, you will need cake. I'm using a box mix today, and I like to imagine all the characters from Game of Thrones are filled with funfetti. For the box mix, I also need some oil, water, and eggs. You'll need some white candy melts, buttercream frosting. Now I'm using store-bought for the cake pops, but I made my own for decorating, and I'll leave that recipe on the website. Scissors, cake pop sticks, an assortment of food coloring to dye the buttercream, a styrofoam block, some small plastic bags, a little yellow fondant, and some edible gold luster dust. The night is dark and full of terrors. The first thing we have to do is to make our cake. And to help us today, I'm going to call upon the Lord of Light to follow the package directions and bake us this confetti cake. Thank you. Now that our cake is baked and cooled, I'll show you how to make it into the cake pop dough. Cut the cake into big sections and then crumble it into a large bowl with your hands. Spoon some frosting into the cake crumbs and mix it in. Start by adding a few spoonfuls at a time. It's always easier to add more frosting than to take it away. You want the dough to be pliable, but not so soft that it doesn't hold its shape. For one boxed mix, I used about half a can of frosting. Mix it together with your hands until you have a smooth dough. Scoop out a small amount of cake dough and then roll it into a ball between your hands. Then slightly taper the bottom bit to form a chin. Repeat this with the remaining dough. Melt some of the candy melts, either over a double boiler or in the microwave, and insert a lollipop stick into the chin end of the cake pop. Remove the stick and dip it into some of the melted candy melt and then reinsert it into the dough ball. Do this with the rest of your cake pops and then set them on a tray and place them in the fridge or the freezer just until the candy has hardened and the cake pop has firmed up. Once the dough is firm enough to hold its shape, dip the entire cake pop into more melted candy melt. Tap off the excess and then place the stick into the styrofoam block to set. Now you want to make sure that your cake pop dough isn't too cold or the candy melt too hot. Otherwise, as the cake pop warms back up, it will expand and could crack your candy shell. Depending on the characters you're making, you may want to adjust the color of the candy melt to match their skin tone. You can add some cocoa powder or oil-based food coloring to get your desired shade. Now that our cake pops have been coated and they've chilled in the fridge for a bit, let me show you how to decorate them. Color the buttercream with whatever colors you need, and then place them into the plastic bags. Snip off a tiny corner on one end to create a piping bag, and have fun decorating. I like to start with their faces. Here I'm making Bran, and I etched out where I wanted his eyes to be with a skewer, and then used gray icing to make his warging expression. I used some chocolate frosting for his eyebrows, pink for his mouth, and then white for his nose. For the hair, I followed a picture I found online, and then I tried to get it as close as I could. Now these cake pops have a cartoony feeling to them, so just keep adding on icing until you're happy with the look. For Daenerys, I gave her a confident expression and then created her flowing hair by dragging some of the white icing down from the top of her head and letting it fall from the bag. Depending on the season, one of many people might be sitting on the Iron Throne. If you've caught up with the show, you'll know that Cersei Lannister is ruling King's Landing. To create her crown, I rolled out some yellow fondant and then used the bottom of a piping tip to cut out half circles along one side. I cut the excess from the bottom and then glued the two ends together with a little water. Once that had set a bit, I brushed the entire crown with gold luster dust. And there they are, my Game of Thrones cake pops. Let's see who's still alive in the land of Westeros. We have Theon Greyjoy, looking a little haggard, Jon Snow, who knows nothing, Bran and Sansa Stark, Brienne of Tarth, next to her crush, Jaime Lannister, who's not looking too pleased about his sister, Queen Cersei, at the moment, Arya Stark, looking ready for battle, Daenerys Targaryen, and finally, Dragon Whisperer Tyrion Lannister. Alright, we did it just in time for the Game of Thrones premiere. Our cake pops are ready. If you like this recipe, check it out on the website, fantasyfujo.com. And please consider supporting us on Patreon. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. I can't believe another season of Game of Thrones is almost here. What do you think is going to happen? People are going to die, people are going to live. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Make sure to follow us on all of the social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and I'll see you next time.